Okay, we'll be starting now. So as you may have seen, fintech industry has gone through some crazy transformation in the last 5 to 10 years. And especially when we talk about the payments industry, it has seen transformation on all the levels. And the craze, the attraction has been so much that even the e-commerce companies or ride-hailing companies have become payment companies, or they have started huge payment divisions in their own big organizations. And thanks to the startup ecosystem, thanks to blockchain, thanks to AI and ML, who are making this transformation, this evolution in the payments industry. And not only startups, but also if you look at traditional banks and Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 organizations, they have also embraced this innovation in the payment space. And that's the reason we are hosting this thought leadership panel on innovations disrupting B2B cross-border payments. We will obviously talking about what kind of innovations have transformed this industry in the past, what kind of innovations or technologies will keep transforming this industry in the next 5 to 10 years, and how this industry is going to look like in the coming years. This panel is hosted with Brdgx and EthAum Venture Partners. This is Pankaj Gupta from EthAum Venture Partners. Just to give you a brief overview of EthAum, we are a deep tech accelerator and fund based in Singapore with approximately 90 startups in our portfolio. All of these are AI, ML, blockchain, IoT, robotics, AR, VR kind of startups from different parts of the world, stages and sectors. When I talk about geography, startups do come from Hong Kong, Israel, US, UK, Latin America, Middle East, Africa, and so on and so forth. And sectors, the startups do come from BFSI, Industry 4.0, retail, supply chain, healthcare kind of industries. Brdgx is one of the portfolio startups that we onboarded in January 2023 cohort, and they are solving local currency transaction problem for the Greater China and Southeast Asia. They have done fantastic business in Hong Kong and now growing really well in Greater China and other Southeast Asian countries. Today's panel is extremely diverse. We have panelists who have had huge banking experience, now consulting experience or startup experience, people who have grown startups from less than 100 employees to 500, 1,000 employees. We have serial entrepreneur in our panel today, so extremely diverse with a lot of knowledge about how the payment industry, how the FX industry has grown in the last, not only a decade, but 2 decades probably. Without further delay, I would request Donald, founder of Brdgx, to do a brief intro of Brdgx. And then I would request our panelists to do an introduction of themselves and then their organization. And then we will dive into the panel discussion. Donald, please go ahead.
Hi everyone. My name is Donald Chen from Brdgx. I'm the co-founder for Brdgx, and it's a solution as a startup that we are offering to simplify the process of treasurizing, providing a treasury network for B2B transactions, for B2B settlements in terms of payments intra-Asia and beyond. Today, I'm very glad to be working with EthAum to be able to work with the panelists here to talk about payment in general, as well as on different areas of focus, ranging from banking, ranging from transactional related matters, ranging to the regions. And we will bring together our expertise today to give a more holistic and an overview of how things are evolving in Asia.
Thanks a lot, Donald. May I request Rana to do a brief intro?
Thanks, Donald. Hey, Pankaj. Hi, everybody. Glad to meet here. Looking forward to have a good discussion. Rana Ditya Palit. Rana, I'm part of EthAum. EthAum is essentially a payments business, a global payments business. We actually move money between borders for businesses. That is what EthAum is. We move money on demand for platforms, financial institutions, for large enterprises, and we do this across borders and in real time through different payment methods. I've been part of this company for about 4 years now, close to, but I've worked in the payments industry. for all my career, worked with banks, worked with money transfer companies like Western Union, and helped them set up Flow Digital. So that's a little bit about me. Again, glad to be here. Over to you, Pankaj.
So, Rana, I think from Western Union to NIAM, you have seen different technologies, different stages of the payments industry. And I think your experience, your expertise will add a lot of value to this conversation today. May I request Soumya to go ahead?
Sure. Hello, all. My name is Soumya Singh. I'm part of Cognizant's Consulting Group. I have been operating in this region for a little more than 12 years now. Yes, I mean, I have been very glad to be involved in some of the marquee and key projects on the transformation side in the region, primarily with the global banks as well as with the regional banks. I think when I started my career as a management trainee in the bank, so those are the days wherein we used to carry the red color check boxes from the clearinghouse to the branches. So all the way from that, I have been involved in some of the blockchain payment initiatives as well. So I think it has been a long journey, but yes, I mean, looking forward to the insightful session that you're going to have today.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Soumya. Definitely, you have seen a range of technologies and how this whole industry has evolved. Thanks a lot for that. Ting, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I'm one team from Cashfree. Cashfree is actually one of the top 3 payment gateway company in India. I had the cross-border business here. So we are strong in India, no matter collecting in India, settle to outside, or collecting across the world and settle back to India. So looking forward for the discussion and looking forward to get more partners. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Tang. Really appreciate your participation today. Guru?
Yeah, hello, hi everyone. My name is Kumara Guru Ramanujan. I'm the founder and the CEO of a newly minted company called Intrasettle. We are a UK-based organization. We are trying to solve the cross-border payment problem using central bank digital currencies. So we've been operational for over a year now. What we are is essentially an infrastructure, a payment rail, which central banks and wholesale banks could use to settle FX transaction and cross-border payments using central bank digital currency, using the payment versus payment method.
Thanks a lot, Guru. I see that you have been a serial entrepreneur. And I think you may have learned a lot while growing your own startup. So I think your perspective on this panel today is going to be extremely fantastic. Thanks a lot, Guru. Now I would request Donald to start this amazing conversation with the panelists. So please take out these interesting questions that you have and let's start the panel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prakash. So with a very diverse audience as well as the panelists, I would like to start off at a relatively high level. Let's talk about bringing it from the sky down to the ground. But in terms of our understanding of the market overall in payments, and especially for all of us, most of us are based in Asia, whether it's South Asia or Southeast Asia, the fact that we as a startup in Brdgx, we always see, start with the problem that we're trying to solve. And I would like to start off, with Guru, where you are in the CBDC side, for example. And we would like to understand, maybe from your perspective, how do you see basically the payment landscape has been evolving in Asia? And what are the problems, that we are seeing that, all of us can here try to address together?
Sure. I think, so the cross-border payments is the juggernaut, so to say. It's not a new problem. It's a 30, 40-year-old problem, and all governments, in fact, G20, the Bank of International Settlements, CPMI have been working on this for quite some time. So what are the key challenges within the industry is quite clear. The cost, the high cost of foreign exchange transaction is the number one thing that's the challenge which is faced across the board. Number two, of course, when we go into the systems, the complexities of each system is so vast. It's not transparent. There's complete lack of transparency within the system itself, and obviously combined with timing, the working hours, the settlement risks that follows. All these have been challenges for over 30, 40 years. Of course, we have improved in the last 10 years or so. When it comes to the customer, it's quite easily very quick and fast. When it comes to foreign exchange settlements, when it comes to the B2B side of things, there are certain risks associated with the correspondent banking system. So these are issues that's been widely talked about by the G20 nations, payments committee, so on and so forth. And they've in fact, I think they've come down with a roadmap of enhancing cross-border payments. They've in fact they have listed about 19 building blocks on which companies and organizations all around the world can come together to work. Where we are, Intrasettle as a company, is working on the 19th block. The 19th block of the CPIM, which talks about completely rethinking cross-border payments, just not from the traditional legacy system point of view, but completely coming up with a new system where the settlements could happen not only in support of the system, but completely a parallel rail, so to say, where the system works 24/7, where there is payment versus payment settlement instead of having FX settlement risks. That's where we as a company, Intrasettle, are working on. That's the challenge we are addressing. Of course, we know we have to integrate into the legacy system. So obviously, we are working on the other building blocks, not only the 19 building blocks. Say, for an example, our systems also follow the ISO 2002 messaging standards. We are also having APIs to connect to local RTGS systems. They are also connecting to central banks who do not have central bank digital currency as of yet. So we are, so to say, a bridge as of now from the old legacy system to a new settlement infrastructure, where central banks and wholesale banks use central bank digital currencies to do their foreign exchange settlements. Either it could be a single push transaction, or it could be a foreign exchange swap, what we in blockchain term call the atomic swap, or in payments term we call it payment versus payment. So we're looking to solve this problem. So essentially what we're doing is we're offering central banks an opportunity to have an alternative infrastructure to do foreign exchange settlement, where the central banks are in complete control of the currency we are issuing, which is the central bank digital currency. And the settlement happens through central bank money.
Thank you. Thank you, Guru. I think it's a good starting point, of a conversation today, understanding, there are actually solutions out there as well. As much as, for example, for ourselves, Brdgx trying to solve the problem in Southeast Asia, there needs to be a fundamental change in the infrastructure for things to happen. If I may bring this topic also, as a starting point for Soumya, when you're in Cognizant, for example, how are you looking at this transformation? And you have been with, on the consulting side of things. How do you see this whole landscape is changing in Asia, Soumya?
Yes. So Donald, that's an an interesting question or for the panelists to tackle through. So what in general, if you look at the last 5 to 10 years, some of the large organizations in the region, what they have been grappling with. So yes, I think what Guru mentioned, there's a legacy system, heavy legacy system to deal through. Whereas on the other side, on the on the demand side, the expectation of the customers also has gone up. Essentially, it's the same set of customers that you're looking at who are dealing with other services which have gone off the curve due to the technology innovation and all that has happened in those sectors. Not necessarily limiting to the banking or the finance sector. So a lot of the leaders, are at a juncture wherein they see, yes, there are some challenges which are getting posed from the legacy, systems that they hold within the organization. Whereas there is a greater demand for all the needs which are coming up in the market primarily from the customer segment. And not to forget, I mean, at this juncture, when they're there, it is not just a like a system uplift that they need to do, or a bit of like customer experience or the digital transformation that they can do. It has to be a convergence between like understanding what those exact business needs are, how do they like transform to whatever like technology innovation or the changes that they need to make within the landscape, and altogether how does it like they provide all the services that's meeting the customer's expectation. So yes, I mean, I think the leaders in most of the organizations at this point of time, they have factored into the roadmap, which they understand is not going to be like a full big bang application of it, but probably a phased manner in which they first try to tackle through like setting up the fundamentals first, understanding like what is really the technology landscape that it can provide or meet up to the business needs, and then they look at the peer, and then they see as to what all can they have when it comes to the market and the industry benchmarking, so that their services out there stands differentiated. So yes, I mean, I think we are at a juncture wherein like the technology and business, they're talking to each other a lot more than what has been happening the last like 10 years back or so.
Thank you, Soumya. I mean, we'll come back to a little bit more on the details with everybody, and to Niam and to Renaud. You're from the product side. Now, I mean, we don't always talk about product. It's just like, okay, we are recreating the whole infrastructure. We see it as, as a startup, always looking at what is available and make the best product out of it. So how do you see, in terms of the problems and the products that you can come up with as a solution to solve the problems that we are seeing in the payment space? And given Niam is, in our view as a startup, you are the leader, in the field.
No, I don't think, I mean, it is drastically different from what Guru and Swami have been talking about, right? So we look at the problems for payments from payments and FX, and specifically when we are talking B2B, from 3 different angles other than the cost part of it. I think cost is, everybody talks about it, so we are going to not talk about it right now. But we look at it as, of course, there is speed, right, which we already talked about, saying legacy systems do not do justice. But I think we have also moved beyond just saying legacy systems do not do justice. I mean, of course, Swift has been van-mounted for a long time because of whatever restrictions they had. But look at what they are now with ISO 22022 and MX messages and GPI and so on and so forth, right? So we've moved beyond those older problems of saying we don't have any rails to today having a lot more modern rails which are faster. But then there are still restrictions, right? I mean, first consider Singapore, right? If you have to still do a real-time payment in Singapore, you can do that only for $200,000. That's it, right? And you cannot do that beyond that. I mean, a business would look at doing $1 million payment, still can't do that. So how do you solve challenges like that? I think is just the bigger problem that we see. The second is reach, right? Because as a business, you would look at how many countries, currencies, where can you deal with, where can you send, where can you collect in. And to do this in every country and every corridor where a business wants to be in, whether there is a trading business out of here trading with a company somewhere in Africa, or somebody in China is trying to get paid by somebody in US, it needs reach and scale at that level. I think that's the second biggest challenge that we are trying to solve. But in the entire chain, what we still don't want to let go of, and which is our biggest focus also when we talk about any product, is the efficiency of doing this all, right? So we look at efficiency in terms of visibility. Where are my payments? That's the first question that we look at. The predictability, when will my payment reach me or whoever I'm making it? And will the payment really actually be fulfilled, right? I think those are some customer behavioral problems that we are also trying to solve for, saying that it's not only about the underlying infrastructure, but how can you really solve for these kind of challenges, which then gives them additional comfort and leads to adoption of this.
Thank you, Rana. So this is a good problem because we're really always we're always working in collaboration with the underlying infrastructure, and like what we all know, right? Each of the countries, the restriction, the fragmentation is really about each country's own need and the own restrictions that's being incurred, right? And even solving a big region like what Ting in cash free side, she's actually solving the problem in terms of aggregating or providing a full solution for payment in India. We would like to see, maybe what we can do in addition to just, getting everyone to work together. We really have to look at one country at a time, where Cash-free has that solution that encompasses everything about, payment in and out of India. Think, could you explain a little bit, on the journey, and where do you see the problem, and how do you come in to solve, what you are seeing in the existing problem in your markets?
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion to look at a country at a time, especially India as a huge market, a very attractive market. In the meantime, it's very difficult to crack because the regulation and all these issues, right? So what we have seen as like in the last 3 years, we have started with trade-based payment in and out of India. And we're always trying to innovate and build a strong solution under the guidelines so that it can be used for long term, not for short term, right? So we have seen some players maybe go with a very light and easy solution, but caught off in between because of regulations. So that's I think the biggest challenge we have seen. It's not easy to build a solution which is convenient for customer. In the meantime, yes, compliant for all the regulations. So what we are doing is to digitalize the whole process, right on the trend of using UPI here in India. UPI is doing really great since 2016. Now it's the most popular payment mode here for B2C transactions. I think there are many international brands looking at Indian market, and they can get a solution for card payment easily. But when it comes to UPI, the challenge is there, right? So what we are focusing on is to offer UPI, especially, or net banking, like these local payment modes for international companies. And in the meantime, we don't need them to have any setup in India. So make it very easy for them to enter Indian market and collect payment in a compliant way. So that's about payment collection. In the meantime, about disperse to Indian beneficiaries, no matter it's a business or individual. India is also the largest inward, the largest country to get inward remittance. Last year it was like 100 billion number, right? So that's a huge market we are looking at as a tech player there. We want to be the one-stop solution. If you want to pay to Indian beneficiaries, no matter as a licensed aggregator outside, you want to set up your own account, you can use our tech to work with multiple banks, or you don't want to set up account at all, and you can use cash-based regulated account to do the payout. So these are the solutions we have built.
Thank you, Ting. So we can see, even just from a position, from a country perspective for India, there is own set of regulations and methods, solution that we have to kind of put together to solve. And then you're talking about various corridors, we call it in the payment side, and various countries that we have to kind of put together, like what EthAum has done so far. But if I were to kind of take this all together from the channel, from the endpoints, from the country's perspective, back to where Guru is, for example, in intra-settle. I can see that you're looking into basically the new way of infrastructure, the new way of settlement, let's say CBDC and so on and so forth. How do you see that we can actually fit that, fundamental change in the infrastructure to connect back with all the endpoints that we're talking about, especially for the region that we're talking about?
Okay, maybe if I get, allow me the opportunity to just expand a little bit and maybe explain myself here. We are still talking about payment systems. So let's look at the remittance, right? Maybe overall, it's 6% the global average for sending money from one part of the world to the other part. Obviously, this is an aggregate of a lot of things, especially when you're sending to India. I think it comes down to 3% and certain points. When you're selling it to Africa, there are corridors which get about 15% fee. in terms of remittance, just in the remittance. We have been researching this, and all the data is out there for everyone to see. This is still high. And when we dig in to see why this is high, obviously, the correspondent banking relationship comes to our view. There have been de-risking happening in this space. Countries in Africa have been de-risked, and the correspondent relationship being stopped there. When it comes to India, let's talk a little bit about India. So India also, there is a problem in terms of settlement risk. The timing is different. We work in a completely different hours to the other regions which are sending in money. Let's look at one of the biggest remittance providers to India, that is UAE. The latest developments with UAE is the Central Bank of India, the Reserve Bank of India, has signed an MOU with the Central Bank of UAE to come up with the CBDC cross-border arrangement. Both India is working on a CBDC and UAE is working on a CBDC. Now they want to, they have a bilateral agreement to come and settle money in a single platform. This will tremendously change things for everyone. Let's look at just cost-wise. I'm sticking to cost because let's look at B2B cost. $27 is the average cost for business to send money on average. That's without foreign exchange markups. So $27. We might see SWIFT coming up with GPI and its new systems, but when it comes to economics, countries like India, it's $27 is enormous. So this is where bilateral agreements like between the RBI and Central Bank of UAE is going to come into place, where each one of them are going to settle using the central bank digital currencies. When I say central bank digital currencies, I mean it's more like a cash settlement. So the settlement is immediate. So this takes away the FX risk of having to have liquidity on both ends, having to have opening hours on both ends. So coming up with a new platform like this is drastically going to change how the whole system is working. JP Morgan released a study. It said it's going to reduce the cost of payment by 80% just by two central banks coming into a network. Imagine the network effect of 5-6 central banks coming into a multiple central bank digital currency network. Obviously, this is not going to happen overnight. There is what's going to happen is both their local systems are going to be integrated. Now, many central banks do not have a CBDC. So what they're going to do is they're going to collect to their local RTGS systems. They're going to work with the current jurisdictions. That's what's the opening hours that are available. There are a lot of these experiments that are happening around the world. I think even in the Chinese corridor, all 7 to 8 central banks have come together, and they are working on the M-Bridge program. And they have successfully already did a pilot, and they didn't have to change any laws. They didn't have to change any jurisdictions, but I think they close to about 120 million euros. Don't quote me there, I might be wrong, but the pilot is already happening and they're moving towards MVP. So we see a lot of these central banks working on platforms like this so that they could reduce, number one, reduce the cost. Number two, bring the operating hours in the alignment. And number three, also reduce the FX risk, also bring down the liquidity cost of parking money on each jurisdiction. So all this is enabling the low cost. But this is not going to happen overnight. First, the interlinking of the payment system is going to happen. But definitely we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel in terms of looking at a holy grail for cross-border payment. That's how the European Central Bank is calling the CBDC platform, the holy grail of cross-border payments. So this is work in progress. Quite a lot of these central banks are working on this. Yeah, like the core PCB, we see light at the end of the tunnel.
Let me bring this, this topic, right? Because if I may point it to Rana in NEOM, looking at these exciting solutions that come on and you're the product, you're the product person. How do you prioritize and how do you make sure that, this actually works in your solution? And, how do we make sure that, we are implementing the right solution for the right, I will call it again, the corridors that's needed. How's the process like in your side to make sure that, we are always, as a startup or as a fintech, right, that we are always on the forefront of, on the product implementation side?
Sure. I think the basic points that Guru had brought in, that's essentially the challenges, right? But when it comes to NEOM, what we look at is delivering a standardized experience across all these corridors to our customers, right? So from a customer perspective, if you can deliver a standard solution, whether you're sending payments from UAE to India or from UK to Africa, and that's what our goal is. So we do work on the tech side to actually manage all of these challenges, to be able to map things up, to be able to create processes internally, all with the aim that from a customer perspective, and we actually are a platform business, right? So we offer our APIs to our customers. And for our customers who are corporates, who are fintechs, who are platforms, they see only one API at the end of the day through which they have to send transactions. So that is the biggest, and this is something that everybody is now looking at doing, saying how do I simplify and how do I make things more standard for customers, while we started assuming all the complexity underneath. Taking it one more level forward from a product and from taking it to customers, and then how do you innovate around that, is the concept of embedded payments today. What we work with is actually a lot of platforms who really are facilitating, like Swami was saying, right? That technology has caught up in a lot of other functions, whether it's on the supply chain side, whether it's on the invoicing side. There are a lot more technology options for customers, for businesses to automate their daily processes, to paymasters to automate their accounts payables, receivables. What we work with is platforms like that to embed these payments within their solutions, right? So we are the payments infrastructure provider. We assume all this complexity. We work with the JPMCs and everybody of the world. We embed all of this as a standard solution within a non-payments but technology provider or a platform provider, and that's what makes this a brilliant solution for end businesses, because now they don't need to really go. It's still the JPMCs processing the payments. It's still going through the rails that are there, but they don't need to go to a bank again and do payments, right? So it's much more accessible for them. They just go into their whatever SaaS application they're using, and from there say, let's make a payment to a vendor in Nigeria, right? And then that gets done. So that's, I think, one of the areas that is solving the experience problem and the access problem to them, as well as we said, the customization that we do internally to be presented as a standardized solution for our customers, which is what helps us position this better.
Thank you. I think, what's interesting is that when we talk about the embedded solution and now the term embedded finance, right? It's not just about, fintech wanting to be the infrastructure, but it's always about working together. Interestingly, we're talking about working together with the banks as well, in a way that, a lot of times we always hear the question, are we competing with the banks, and things like that. But ultimately, we are fintechs, we are a payment service provider, and the underlying infrastructure is still related to the banks, meaning we are looking at bank as a partner, bank as a service provider to us. But this is the point that I want to bring it, to Soumya, to kind of understand from your perspective, working with, both the banks and the fintechs, there's definitely a lot of challenges, for us to work together with the banks. But with all this new technology coming into place, how do you make your decision and recommendation to the banks such that, from a very fintech perspective, how can we work together, from your perspective, that we can work together with the banks to provide a better payment solution?
Right. So, Donald, when we look at it, what the market has to provide, just wearing somebody, since you specified as to from a bank's perspective, how does all these things look like? And in particular, like Rana mentioned about the embedded products and all, right? So I think the industry has, tried to adapt it at various stages. Some of the banks are probably more proactive than the others, but definitely there is a shift in gear which is taking place, in the couple of years that we have seen. So what's happening, or like some of the critical factors like that comes and plays around it. Say, for example, like a bank which has got its network maybe like very strong in APAC, but not that good in when it comes to Europe and Africa and all. So for them, things like the embedded products are tying up with, like somebody who is a fintech provider, and they agree at some point as to when will they do the handshaking, so that like further to that point, the payment processing is taken care by the fintech. And if I could just take another example, like outside of the banking industry, right? So today, when I'm buying any airline ticket, I just have a small tick box to say as to, like you pay $10 more, and or you get this particular insurance, like in case your luggage is lost. I really don't get to know, which is that insurance provider which is working in the background to provide all those services, because as you can understand, right, there is also something, like they have to fire to the insurance company and get that particular detail, and then it comes up on my screen. So similarly, I think what's going to happen increasingly more as a trend that you see now, and it's going to be gaining popularity, is like for the customer when logs into the bank and then like effects a transaction to some country, like which is maybe in the designated payment corridor the bank has specified on, the customer will not get to know as to at what point the bank has handed it over to the fintech service provider and they've taken care of it. The commercials will not be even known to the bank, but what the customer will get to know, I think this is where the banks are also undergoing the transformation, is like the option probably would be available to the bank. So if it is X dollar that you intend to pay, then it is going to take this many days. But if it is like say X plus another delta that you intend to pay, we could process it in a shorter period of time. So customer is only left out with these options to select and go through the payment processing. But there's a whole lot of things that's happening around in the background. And I think to your question as to when does the bank decide on all? Yes, there's like lot, not just on the payment processing or the API infrastructure talking about, there's a lot of like, say the payment corridor, the risk, the currencies that are involved in, and like whether the banks have got their own setup in those the end payment destinations. Is there a correspondence banking arrangement? Do they have it there, or do they not have anything at all in the payment destination currency? So I think those are some of the factors that plays in. So it's a combination of as to the banks present in that particular destination country. One is like the technology, the kind of capability that they have so that they can do this handshaking with the fintech in an easier way. And the third is like, yes, while they do or get into this arrangement, are they still aligned well when it comes to meeting the regulatory requirements? Because end of the day, the accountability is still with the bank. So yeah, these are some of the key factors I could pinpoint on, like when it comes to when do or how do like bank decide on like what is it that they should do and what is it they probably should do the handshaking with the fintech providers.
Thank you. I mean, at the end of the day, right, it's really, ultimately, whether it's a fintech or the bank, to understand basically each other's problem. I mean, it sounds like, the bank themselves do have their own set of problems. And, without understanding how, in fact, each of the banks, the internal working process is not easy to kind of solve the problem just within the bank itself. But if I were to turn it around at this point for Ting, in cash-free side, right, because you are looking at it from a country perspective, that we know that you are serving India as a market or as a solution for cross-border, for local as well. You have solution ranging from payment gateway to to payouts, to disbursement, different methods of collection, different methods of payouts. How do you educate, or how do you allow the your counterparts or your partners or even your customer to understand how can they deal with basically India as a market, and what are the solutions that you can offer? What's your thought process or educating your clients?
Got it. Yeah. Here, actually, what we have seen is that these are clients who have been interested to know like what solution is there for India, especially I think payment collection. We have seen a lot of demand, but in the meantime, we are seeing that because it's highly regulated, not all line of business we can support. So in terms of educating clients, I would say that more at the regulation side, we will need to understand what business are they doing, and for this business, what channel can we use, right? So when we are like obviously, as one of the largest emerging country, India is already a market everyone is looking at. But in the meantime, like we need to get into details to see what exactly are they collecting payment for, what kind of customer are they targeting. So that's for payment collection. And in terms of remittance inward to India, so there, the education is more for, let's see, when we reach out and discuss about these solutions. About AML, yeah, I would say that that's a major part, right? So here, that's also one blocker for cross-border payment. We would love to build a real-time payout solution for cross-border as well. You know, Cashfree is the largest player in payout in domestic market. We have over 50% of market share. It's all smooth and automated. But when it comes to cross-border, it takes time, like one working day. In some in some channel it's real time, but in some channel it's like when it comes to trade-based payment, we do need to check and then get back. So that is a part we see that sometimes the client will feel that the turnaround time is a bit longer than expected. So but in order to control the risk and make it more sustainable, that's what we have right now. We are looking forward to have a better solution there to make it smoother. Yeah.
Thank you, Ting. I mean, it's really important for us to understand, how much actually work and knowledge has gone into building this product, and in turn to translate it to the customers is important. Just like what we do, each of the market that all of us are handling, whether it's payment to China, payment to India, payment collection from Southeast Asia, it has its own nuances, whether it's the messages, the method, and so on and so forth. But being able to, from our perspective, whether this Brdgx is a startup, or whether from the consulting side, or whether from a new digital side of things, it all needs to kind of work hand in hand together to make a solution happen. Now, if I were to kind of take this session and kind of bring to each of you again on the topic about innovation, how, whether it's cross-border payment or payment in general or digital banking in general, maybe I will go around the table or go around to all the panelists to ask, where do you see over the next few years, 5 years, for example, that you see the game-changing technology or the game-changing things that's going to happen in the payment and the banking space that is going to disrupt the market the most? If I may bring this back to starting with Guru.
So let's look at blockchain, right? So when blockchain came along, I think it solved the cross-border payment problem. So the thing with cross-border payments is having to wait to make a payment and then wait for the other party to then return the payment. So what we call this, so we make a payment and having to trust the other party to do the foreign exchange and then return the payment. So this problem is solved. So if you're dealing with cash, so if you're having cash and if you're going to the counter and you're giving someone, say, a £100 note for an exchange of for an exchange of INR. So if you're giving cash, you're receiving cash, the problem is solved. There's no risk there. The system works very beautifully. So when blockchain came along, it solved for this problem. It created a cash system which could be settled instantly, which could be settled atomically, where we could have payment versus payment mechanisms. So the blockchain so far had been currencies which the government couldn't trust. It was a Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, whatsoever. The governments weren't going to trust these currencies. Now, the new development with central bank digital currencies, what this means is central banks are issuing their currencies on a blockchain or a non-blockchain based system. But essentially, it's going to act like cash. So what's the implication when it comes to cross-border payments? Number one, it's going to, the transactions are going to be like cash. Say if two entities are going to settle, it's going to dramatically bring down the FX settlement risk because it's a payment versus payment mechanism, number one. Number two, the parking of liquidity on either side of the transaction can be reduced because it could happen on a platform which is completely controlled by the central bank, number two. Number three, the central bank, since it's controlling the platform, it's going to be using the central bank money for settlements. That reduces the risk in terms of handling other bank money. Number four, this system also gives the opportunity for central banks to settle with their own currency. So settle with their local currency. Say for an example, today a transaction between a Thailand corporate and a Chinese mainland corporate happens within US dollars. Usually it happens within US dollars because of what's happening within the FX market. But in a system where multiple central banks could come together to issue their own central bank digital currency and exchange payment versus payment mechanisms on the platform, they could use their own currency for settlement. So this is what the system I just described is what is being called as multiple central bank digital currency system or a platform. Quite a lot of these central banks are working on this. Reported by JP Morgan and others, it could reduce the cost of payment by 80%, the time and the speed of payment by 50%, and settle within their own local currency. So combining these three benefits on a system, I think, like I described earlier, this is the holy grail. This is going to completely change the entire cross-border payment system. And it will happen very quickly. All the Brdgx project is already moving towards a product phase. We could see bunches of central banks coming into agreements within each other to settle using their own CBDC system. So the innovation is happening so fast and so quick. Just leave you with a thought hanging there. Tomorrow we're going to see not only corporates paying between each other, we're going to see machines talking to each other, making cross-border payments. And so we're going to see artificial intelligent machines on either side of the cross-border paying each other for transactions. It could be weather, it could be GPS, whatnot. And it could be micro payments. It could be payments that are less than $1. So all this is enabled by a blockchain-based multi-CBDC systems where I could see micro payments being enabled over cross-border in their own currencies on the central bank money, which reduces all the risk. So there are a lot of these benefits happening. The countries are moving very quickly, and I certainly believe this is going to be the game changer.
For Soumya, if you look from the bank's angle and from where you're giving a consultant advice for all of us, with your, let's say, in 1 minute, where do you see are the key changes that we all should, whether it's fintech or banks, look into?
Yes, I think Guru has already highlighted on the blockchain side of things, and I do believe as well, in the coming time, maybe 5 years, 10 years down the line. So we are going to see increasingly this machine-to-machine, payment ecosystem coming up, as well as he talked about the micro payments as well. I think these are two areas definitely which is going to garner a lot of significance in the coming days. The other, the one that I would think so would be around the data science. I think we're still evolving. We're not there yet, but in another 5 years time or so, we will be leveraging on it quite a bit. I mean, not just on the customer side. I mean, we have been using it to understand the customer a lot more better now. But it's also going to define as to how within the, the finance or the banking organizations, things are happening. Say, just to take an example, if there is a payment that has got initiated from the customer, we probably are leveraging the data science hey, do I need to use my network? Do I need to use FinTech A fintech B, like there's going to be a whole lot of data which is going to back up and say, okay, follow this particular path so that your payment is definitely going to get in there. And, like there's a lot of transparency you can bring in, plus the cost savings. So I think these are the two areas I'd like to call out, which is going to play like a lot more, like part in another 5 years time. Next.
Thank you. So with this, for now, for our first half of the session, we'll wrap this up, with a lot of insights from all our panelists and speakers.
Thanks, Donald, for moderating the panel so well. Thanks to Rana, Soumya, Guru, and Tink for the insightful conversation. I think we could have gone with this for hours and hours, but we have to move on to the next segment of the event, which is the roast session. And I'm equally excited about the roast session because this is the session where we are able to get some brutal feedback and some direct questions from the industry leaders, subject matter experts. And why I specifically love this session, because most of the times startup founders are not able to get a brutal feedback. They are either getting a sugar-coated BS or just complete silence. And that doesn't help, right? We want to hear what industry leaders think on the solution, on the competitive landscape, on the go-to-market strategy from their perspective. And obviously, would love to answer questions that you're going to ask and would love to get your feedback. So Donald, could you please present your slides, share your screen, and take us through the solution? Thank you. Please go ahead. Unmute yourself. Unmute.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for all the speakers' time for today, as well as giving me over the next half an hour for the feedback that we need for Brdgx. And as what we have discussed so far, Brdgx is basically an Asia-focused payment solution, looking at ourselves, simplifying the process of business treasury. We look at ourselves as a solution to be able to provide a digital solution to treasurize what a B2B transaction need in terms of money in and money out, payable, receivable, out of the region in Southeast Asia and in Greater China, to provide that endless local currency seamless solution. Now, we came in the picture, relatively late in the market, just pre-COVID, but we are still up till today seeing basically a lot of fragmentation and problem in the Asia payment market. Whether it's limited accessibility in terms of payment to or receiving money from various markets in Southeast Asia and other parts of Asia. It's a fragmented market and a slow process. We do know that, the big economies, whether it is US, Europe, and China, with their currencies that we're handling, it is already relatively efficient. But dealing with Southeast Asia as a whole still presents a lot of inefficiency. And that's why Brdgx came into the picture as a treasury solution. We are not necessarily the first adopter of all the new solutions, but we aim to be able to provide an integrated, aggregated solution that suits each of the markets' need to connect Southeast Asia with the global market, especially to China, where up to today, we're still seeing basically a local currency to local currency transaction issue, whether it's with the banks, with the non-banks, and with the enterprises or SMEs. Now, I'll just jump straight into the use case that we are always looking at. Is really more about the industry. If we are talking about from an end customer and business perspective, that is B2B, for example. If we're talking about a big enterprise level type of solution, whether they are in the FMCG segment, logistics segment, there really isn't a big problem because they're very well served by the banks. They themselves may have their own payment gateway solution. They have their own local treasury, their own local access. But when it comes to the SMEs, the micro SMEs, and even the self-employed, meaning we're talking about the consultants, we're talking about their own businesses. It's always very hard to access in terms of how can I pay, make my vendor payment, how can I make my salary payment to different jurisdiction, let's say within Southeast Asia, or how can I make my merchant or supplier payment to China. And on the other hand, the big problem they're solving is that I couldn't just say that I want to plug in another payment gateway that use credit card, because each of these jurisdictions they're serving in terms of the receivable part, there are various payment methods that is needed to enable them to collect in local currency. And that's where we see as a problem intra-Asia, both from the receivable and payable standpoint, that we see there's a need for us to basically provide a platform that allows basically payment to happen into and out of Southeast Asia and into and out of the global market, especially making payment to China. That where we are working with, with the infrastructure underlying, depending on how the markets is evolving, including basically working with the larger fintech players to enable basically with our solution to provide basically the pipeline to enable local payment methods to happen, the convertibility of the currencies to overcome the restriction legitimately and compliantly, and making this global payout happen. And that's where we see ourselves working with our underlying infrastructure, be it an embedded finance solution, be it a bank, to kind of bring all this together to solve the problem for the SMEs. So our solution overall is really about payment, is about collection, it's about channels we having, it could be competing with some of our competitors, but also at the same time, be able to offer a holistic solution that can pay, that can collect, and that will provide back the reconciliation and analytics. And that's how we are basically looking at ourselves as a solution that talking about speed and cost and compliance, this is really what we look at it as the end-to-end process to allow payment to happen using the best method for the best corridor or for the corridor that is in place in the most seamless way, handling both different transaction sizes, different transaction purpose from a country and from a region perspective. That's how Brdgx look at our solution as a solution provider together with other fintechs and the banks for other businesses. So this is a quick introduction about what Brdgx is doing. And I'm happy to kind of bring it to the next level in terms of the detail and where we are at with our business.
Okay, who is going to ask the first difficult question?
Or we can make it as a challenging question or something that we can discuss even further.
So Matt, I don't know if you're trying to say you're on mute. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I can go ahead. So yeah, thanks for providing the overview on Brdgx. And yes, definitely like a lot of gap that you see in the market, like wherein Brdgx is trying to complement there. But maybe the first question that I would have in mind, right? So when it comes to the positioning of Brdgx, is it like more positioned as, like taking care of the remittances, or is it more like, like we can take care of your treasury solutions? Because this, or is it like you can do either of this, or you may also do both of it with Brdgx? So say for example, if I look at some of the other players in the market, maybe like retail, corporate, but there is a very clear-cut positioning that they have carved out in the market, which is essentially, hey, I only do remittances. When you do remittance through me, you get a better rate, and you are sure as to your remittance is going to be there, right, within this point of time. So when it comes to Brdgx, I would like to understand, Donald, like when it comes to the primary positioning, is it like more on the remittance side? Is it like the treasury? When I say the treasury, like managing the virtual accounts, the P&L, balance sheet, and those stuff, or is it like a combination of both of it?
Yeah, I mean, as much as possible, our vision is to be able to provide a full infrastructure, right? For our business clients. But to be realistic, and where the market we're focusing on, which is Southeast Asia, and we see it basically the main problem here is actually not solving everything, but really focusing on what we call the payment rails that enable business to business, meaning B2B type of this that transaction to happen. So my short answer is that we focus actually on payment rather than remittance. The term remittance that we define here is really more on the individual person-to-person perspective. Is a well-covered solution, even by a lot of you that you have already known the solution, and a lot of the leaders here. It is, as a startup, it is a difficult game to penetrate, because we are always talking about is it cheaper, is it faster, but what are the innovation that comes in? But we would turn it a little bit around to look at it as the problem in actually the business payment. Now, business payment can also contain the individual, but this is really more about, like, let's say salary, is really more about consultancy of payment. But from a business to business perspective, that is where we see the challenge, because especially when we say we want to kind of provide a full solution for Southeast Asia, there's two products already that we're talking about. One single problem that we're seeing is, how can we enable basically various countries in Southeast Asia who are handling their own restrictions and local currency, allowing them to make payment out of the country in non-US dollar term? Because right now we know the whole Asia, a lot of times we are talking about US dollar as the currency, as the transaction. But ultimately, when you want to make a business payment to another Southeast Asian country, or you make a payment to China, whereby the big supplier basis is really ultimately as an SME to SME type of transaction, is still really about the local currency to the local currency. Now, what a lot of people didn't understand is that, what's the problem of payment to China? The problem of payment to China, for example, for Southeast Asia, is the fact that besides the enterprise to enterprise layer, or type of customers that already have their whole infrastructure, banking relationship, and the ability to handle multi-currency, is actually the SMEs and the micro SMEs that has a problem, because the SME in Southeast Asia, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's Malaysia, Singapore, or Thailand, or Vietnam, Philippines, and others, having the problem because they are the counterparty as a supplier or as a beneficiary in China are also SMEs. They may not have the necessary capabilities to receive foreign currencies. So where we come in is that we have to work with, for example, we can work with EthAum, but we can also work with some other players to ensure that different business segments, different payment purpose can all happen on one single platform, so that if I am a vendor, or if I am a vendor in China, I can receive the money. If I am the payer or sender of the money, I can actually make different type of payments to a consultant to pay for supply, to pay for my logistic fees in a seamless way, just by making payment to different countries in Southeast Asia and to China. So that's our focus. Our focus is to allow I would say, transaction types to happen in local currency. And of course, behind it, I would love to have that single infrastructure supporting me, because we are offered a solution. We are not here to create the infrastructure ourselves, but to aggregate and to make this happen, to say that I know if you're making payment to vendor, you're making payment to suppliers, you're making payment to a person, to a specific country in different amount, we can make it happen for you. So that's actually what we focus on, not so much about the the remittance side, but actually solving business payment problem.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, please go ahead, Guru.
Okay. So let me just come up with a scenario. I don't know. Say I'm a business in Thailand, and I want to pay a Chinese mainland enterprise. So I get to your platform, then I'm able to send them money using Thai baht. Is that right?
That's what we are talking about, because if you're talking about, let's be very specific on the scenario. I am not the conglomerate in Thailand. I'm just another SME, right? I want to pay to China because I have Chinese products that I have purchased, that I want to sell to the local market, whether I'm selling in Chatuchak, for example, in Bangkok. I'm just basically selling to the community, or even selling, on my shop, right, or online stores. The problem is that when I collect the payment, there's no problem with collecting Thai baht because they have their own local payment gateways. Am I right? But now I'm holding on to the Thai baht. Then what's next? I would have to then work with my bank or find another remittance way to say that, please help me, settle my Thai baht. I need to pay my suppliers for let's say shoes, let's say fashion goods, let's say electronic goods. How do I pay to the Chinese? And then the bank will say that, I can help you to send it in US dollars. Let your Chinese counterpart to convert it back to CNY, for example. Now, the problem is that it's not the bank cannot do it. the bank in Thailand can do it. But at the same time, the problem is that once I push the money out of Thailand, then the counterparty, which is the China side, for example, is not, because they are also SME sellers. They don't have the capability, or they don't have the kind of account capability with their own banks to receive the US dollar and convert to CNY. And a lot of time, the problem becomes that, is okay, I would send it, in US dollar, but unfortunately, the receiver doesn't have that banking capability to receive the money. Then how do we do it? The problem is that we found that it is actually a challenging problem if they were to find a legitimate or compliant way to send this small ticket size money as a business to China. So what I'm trying to explain is that it is, from a customer perspective, is a Thai baht to CNY conversion, but I would work in between to handle basically the nuances related to compliance, as well as related to the conversion that is needed from Thai baht to CNY, for example.
Wouldn't the bank in Thailand just do that for them? Say if so I'm banking with so I'm an SME who's bought some shoes from Thailand. So I have my bank. So can't I just ask my bank to do that for me? Just pay the supplier in CNY?
That's actually possible. You can ask the Thai bank to do it, and it can also be potentially in CNY. But unfortunately, a lot of times, based on our understanding, maybe Rana, for example, he would also have some information on that and insights. The question is that the bank can say, I can do it, but they are ultimately using a SWIFT solution. I'm not saying SWIFT is no good. I'm not here to replace SWIFT. A lot of people say, I'm here to replace SWIFT, but we are not. But SWIFT is primarily handling a lot of the US dollar transaction. The Thai bank will push what we call the responsibility back to the China banks or the beneficiary side to say that my money is now in the beneficiary account in US dollar.
Okay,
the China side would then have to settle it.
So the question now is, okay, so the bank in Thailand needs a foreign conversion. That's all right. So a bank in Thailand has to convert the Thai baht into CNY and send it to the supplier. That's the only conversion that we're talking about, right?
I think I'm not agreeing, but I think good luck having a bank in Thailand sending CNY to China, because it's virtually. I think I identify with the problem that we are here. I think three problems in that we have seen, right? And then this is one of my follow-on questions to Donald. One is China as a regulatory market is very tough, right? So any business-to-business transactions to China needs a lot of documentation to prove that the purpose that you have sent it and the underlying requirements and all of that is valid. India used to be like this. India is much better right now today because of a lot of automation in that. I think that's one big problem. So even if you send it as a wire over SWIFT, it falls upon the beneficiary to go submit documentation and get that payment out, and then you don't know how much that will be deducted. The second problem is, of course, the same time and visibility part. I mean, the Thai bank will never be able to guarantee you how much CNY will reach. It's very difficult to even do our payments over SWIFT on CNY. And the third part is access. I think this seller in Chattajang market will really not be the one that can access a K-Bank's online portal and then go do all of that stuff. So I think those are very virtual problems that exist with the current routes. The banking route exists, but it's far too cumbersome, too costly, and too time-taking to do it rather than anything else here.
There's so far no perfect single solution that allows you to make payment to China. That isn't a perfect solution from an outside world's perspective, meaning outside of China. Whether you're from Thailand, whether you're from Malaysia, even in Singapore, it is getting better, especially for C2C payment. There are many more ways to make remittance type of payments. But when it comes to business, because of the documentation, because of the clearing requirement in China, it makes it difficult to use SWIFT, because once the money touch the border, for example, in China, when things are not clear from a beneficiary bank's perspective, your money get rejected. It's not even about cost. The cost is really more about it's not just about the 2, 3, or even 5, or even 10% cost on the transaction. The real risk is your payment never reached there, and you get back the money, and because you're paying supplier, and the supplier doesn't get the money, for example, and you don't get the supply. So that's actually the bigger issue.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, but even Brdgx would actually have to settle on one of these rails, right? The Swift rail, even though you provide, or do you have your own rail to settle to China?
The way that we work differently is not to say that we bypass Swift, because that is the way from the first leg, I will call it, to be able to get back my US dollars at this point of time, from Thailand, for example. But now what we are solving is together with the banks and with the infrastructure in China to optimize basically the channel that we use in China and the necessary payment message that is needed in China to clear the dollar to CNY type of transactions that enable an SME or enable the beneficiary to receive the Chinese yuan efficiently. There's cost involved, but we are already reducing the cost. But more importantly, aside from the cost, is really about the speed and the certainty of settlement into China.
Okay. So you're using an alternative to the banking relationships? Is that what you're saying?
We are using basically a combination of local rails in China to make it happen.
And you do the settlement between the later.
We would do the settlement. So basically, in a way that we, from a client perspective, they will be able to give us the currency that they need, and from a beneficiary perspective, they will be able to seamlessly receive the payment in CNY, in Chinese yuan.
And just one last final thing. And the client would be able to acknowledge that the payment has come through to them from their end, or would it be that you paid?
You mean for the beneficiary to acknowledge that they received the money?
Okay, so the supplier received the money, and it will be acknowledged to the customer, the Thai customer, or would it be acknowledged to you, and you give the acknowledgement to the Thai customer?
We received the payment confirmation from the actual, we call it the distribution or endpoint, and we can actually provide that acknowledgement back to the sender.
So you're the trusted party.
In a way, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm just highlighting, basically one of these challenges when we say Southeast Asia and China. Where's the problem? Actually, it's not just a Southeast Asia and China problem. We're solving two problems that we have to. One is actually payment from Southeast Asia, and the other problem is actually payment to China. These are two separate problems, but once you combine them together, it becomes like basically, you have two problems to solve before the money can actually go out and go in.
I think Rana had a question.
Just a follow-up of the same conversation, Donald. How are you managing this entire documentation part and compliance part of it for managing payments to China? Because that's a huge requirement from a regulatory and B2B perspective from China.
That's correct. So a lot of times, I'm not saying that we have 100% solution for all kind of cases, because right now we are able to deal with payments related to trade related and e-commerce, basically physical goods related. If you're talking about, a payment that's anything out of the norm and that's too sensitive, we can't deal with it. All right. It's like, oh, I want to put in investment money into China. It's not something that we can deal with. Please go back to the bank to do it, because this is usually deal with large amount and they have capabilities to do it. But for ourselves, in terms of documentation, we will zoom in to really talk about the trade physical goods side of things. Let's say SME paying for supplier. This is the part that we actually do request the necessary information from the SME in the sender side, and they are usually quite willing to provide the necessary supporting document, and we understand the nature of the business, and to provide basically, I wouldn't call it a language translation, but really translating what are the details of these messages, and be able to supply this information to the China clearing or to our China bank and counterparty to have enough line items of the information, just like filling up an MT-103, and have enough detail. It's more than an MT-103, but it's enough transactional detail about the transactions that we do it as a service for our clients.
Understood.
And here, in terms of the banking partners in China, like, do you have one fixed bank? Do you need the beneficiaries to hold account with certain bank, or like you are covering like across banks, any SMEs in China? When you do
Not, I would say not yet every SME. Like I said, when you only deal with trade that we can use this. Otherwise, it's either trade or either personal payment. So with enough supporting information, we have basically a combination of our banking rails that we know what type of size of transactions, and the region is a complicated thing in a way. Because when you look at China, you have to look at the region in China, you have to look at the transaction type in order for us to select the right channel for this transaction to happen. So it's a combination. But at the same time, it wouldn't be really just fixated to a specific bank that can do it, because that defeats the purpose. That's how we started. We started to say that, oh, you can only send it to, let's say, Bank of China, for example. And then we soon realized that, China is just so big, and you are saying sending the money to Bank of China doesn't mean that you're sending all the money to China. But so that doesn't work if we are actually limiting ourselves to a specific bank. But we actually work on a product perspective or trade perspective to say this purpose to this region or this purpose of certain transaction size, we can make it happen.
Great. And do you have a limit of transaction value, like up to how much per transaction?
With enough supporting information and messages, there isn't a limit per se, but you look at the supplier and the beneficiary perspective. If it is a high amount and a big amount they're transacting with, let's say a full container worth of goods, they are usually at the level as an exporter or importer of a certain scale that they would not have this kind of small business pain points. They would be the ones who already have their own export quota, their business banking relationship. That using SWIFT is not a problem. And by the time that money reaches China in US dollar, they already have the necessary information to work with their own bank to clear the US dollar or the foreign currencies and convert it back into local currency in CNY. So that's why I said transaction limit, there's no limit. But beyond a certain point, the beneficiary or the originator doesn't need us in the picture. We are really looking at the SME part, and because of the size of the SMEs and the type of transaction and size of transaction, it kind of reduced the actual high limit on the transactions.
Got it. Apart from smoothing the paperwork part, how about cost-wise? How is it comparing to banks?
How is it? There's no comparison because it's very competitive.
Okay.
We have very good both FX rates and fees that we can incur. That's very transparent to our clients, and they know that this is really almost from their perspective, almost at no cost.
Okay.
I think there was another question. Was it Soumya or Rana?
No, I was just going to ask, is there a minimum value transaction?
The minimum value.
Yeah, can we do micropayments?
Micropayments is possible, but it depends on how small. But usually, we do have a small limit because of the fees and conversion involved on our side. We do kind of put a small transaction limit. But I can just give you, for example, just a benchmark, right? We don't usually see anything less than like 1 to 200 yuan, let's say about 20 to 30 US dollars. We kind of don't see many transactions that goes below that. And in fact, if there's someone who want to send like, let's say $5 to $10 US dollar worth of transaction in China, we will start to question, why is that such a small transaction that has to go through a cross border?
Okay, and is that a transaction fee for every transaction? How is it?
This is usually a commercial arrangement. It depends on basically our customer type that we work with. But maybe when we have more questions, I would also kind of like to understand, how all of us are seeing the pain points, right? Because one side is China, and it's always a big topic. But the other side that we are always looking for a more holistic solution that we are expanding ourselves into is like what Guru you have asked. Thailand, can you get the money from Thailand? Can you get the money from Vietnam? Can you get the money from Indonesia, from Malaysia, can you get basically all the money from Southeast Asia in the local currency and settle me in all the currency that we need? This is actually a lot of times we face this question. Can you cover the whole Southeast Asia in all kind of payment methods to solve the problem about payment collection? And this is something that we do always look out for the best solution we can do in each of the location. And then we realize that it is not possible to do it by ourselves. Each of the location has the best, has the leader as a payment gateway with multiple collection method. And what we have to focus on is to work with the best payment gateway locally, but also have our own infrastructure to make the convertibility of the currency with the compliant method that actually goes into it. So this is how we see as the combination that needs to happen for payment collection in Southeast Asia.
I think, Donald, all of these are very controlled currencies, right? So moving out currencies from each of these markets have their own challenges. We've worked with some of these markets over time, built over time, and understood the challenges there. I agree with you, Thailand. I mean, countries like Thailand, for example, are very, very restricted in terms of the currency, and thus any money moving out is tightly controlled through the banking rails. But I think also you've also simultaneously come up with the solution for that, because you need licensed providers in each of these markets to help you build the solutions in each of the market, right? So that's again something that's not impossible to do. It's just hard enough to do for all the markets together. So in that case, what would be the markets that you're looking at, really saying this is the biggest one that I can solve with one by one? And that would be the approach, because this is a network business at the end of the day, right? So you don't build a network over one day, you build it over time. But you could look at, you should build a strength to seeing and look at the smaller, at the more easier markets to do this, namely, let's say Singapore, right? And then be able to do that. So what markets are you thinking in your priority list that you're looking at?
We look at it in two fronts. I think ultimately, Bernard, you have pointed it correctly. Because each of these Asian markets where we all are coming from has its own local currency restrictions, we can't tackle it all at once. And our approach is this, right? We tackle the market that we can take care of in two ways. One is where we have license. For example, in Singapore, we currently have license. In Malaysia, we have license. We're in the process of other countries. But that doesn't mean that, with the license, we can be all by ourselves. With or without license, it's really more about how we extend to the local markets, working with the license partner over there and solve their pain point. If I am offering my solution in China, for example, or settlement to China as a solution, then I already have basically my initial starting point to say I would want to work with a local partner locally to handle their customer base who want to solve the problem of payment in China. But as we extend, right, then we also look at basically where we can actually offer a more to the endpoint type of solution in the market. So that's how we look at it. But if you ask in a more generic way, right, I would definitely look at the market size on the products that we're looking at. For example, trade is a big trade and travel. They are both basically big markets, right? Then I have to look at basically from an analytics standpoint, where are the trade flow coming in and going out of? And where are we able to provide an end-to-end solution first? And this is how we look at the market. So, in general, Southeast Asia, the biggest market in population from the perspective is Indonesia. But does it mean that we have to tackle Indonesia first? Yes and no. We will look at it as, it's a big and competitive market. But if we can serve a relatively smaller market that have its own problem, and we can actually reach all the way there, for example, Malaysia, for example, even Cambodia, we're looking into it. Then we will provide our solution first as a startup.
Thanks.
I see that all our panelists were extremely generous with their feedback. No difficult questions. Soumya, are you trying to say something?
Yeah, maybe one point just wanted to understand with respect to like what Rana you brought up. So from a SME or from your client perspective, right? how much independent can they work with Brdgx compared to like, or do they always have to go hand in hand with a bank relationship as well? So when I talk about this, I'm looking at, like from two services that banks essentially provide. One is like the payment service, and the second one, as you talked about, like, say managing their as a payment collection, maybe for the region, the banks do it, and how much could Brdgx do it, like, like independently, or maybe just some statistics in and around that would be like good to know.
To us in Brdgx, I think that question is a very good question, because it's really more about both how we can serve our customer, the sender of the money, for example, as a strategy standpoint, whether we should basically work on a direct customer, that are already served by the bank, or should we like, in a way serve the bank. So I think, we are also, experimenting both ways of working with our end customers to say, do you prefer us to be serving you directly, and you send the fund to us, we help you clear it, we onboard you, or is it more efficient to kind of look at it as a service to platforms, including banks? We are always looking into it, but but as a startup, we are beggar in a way, right? So we see whichever opportunity that comes to us, and we try to solve the problem to say our solution is offer payment to China or payment collection from Southeast Asia. And we look at both at this point of time, the SME and the platforms or communities that can serve the SMEs. So we look at it both ways, but we don't have a straightforward answer to say which one can we serve better at this point of time, because one is higher margin, lower volume, and the other one is higher volume, lower margin.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks.
Hey, thanks. I just need to drop off, so in
Sure.
case you want to continue, please go ahead. But thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
With each of you. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Rana. We are finishing up, obviously, but yeah, really appreciate your feedback, your insights today. Thanks to Guru, Teng, Soumya as well. Loved your insights. And I think the discussion was very insightful and free-flowing. And obviously, we were able to get insights from different perspectives and different geographical expertise. So really appreciate that. I think it'll be good to reconnect in the future and see how we can collaborate. Obviously, if Brdgx can help you with some of your projects, initiatives, that will be awesome. If Brdgx can receive more of your support or guidance in terms of go-to-market, in terms of product roadmap, then obviously that'll be highly appreciated. So again, let's try to reconnect in a couple of weeks and see what we can do together. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Campbell. I think you have done really well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.